Everyone, we're going to call this meeting to order. It's Friday, March 21st, meeting of the Metropolitan Planning Organization Board. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can have a call of the roll, please. Here. Here.
Present. Here.
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 Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Present. Here. Thank you. We'll start with the consent agenda. We'll take public comment. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda this morning? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second?
Lehman.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We'll move on then to public hearing items. We will take public hearing comments and new business comments as well from the public. We have approval of amendments to the fiscal year 2024-2025 to fiscal year 2028-2029 Transportation Improvement Program. Don?
So there's adding two new projects and amending one new project that's already in there, adding a new project for Federal Transit Administration 5310 grant award for capital funding for Lee Train in the amount of $255,000. Also adding a new rail safety project on Veronica Shoemaker just north of State Road 80 at $510,000. And then amending the operating assistance amount for Lee Train's US 41 corridor, recognize some additional funding for a total of $3.9 million.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Does this funding change any existing funding from another project?
No.
So we just found the money to fund this?
Yep.
Is there a lot of them funds?
Well, some of it's grants, some of it's safety, and
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Can we hold off on that? Any other questions? Public comment on this item? Seeing none, now we'll take Laura's motion.
To approve.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on. Approve the annual I'm sorry, you're right. It was even on my cheat sheet. Here, yes.
Yes. Here.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Yes. Aye.
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 Can't blame the chair for trying. Approve the annual FDOT MPO joint certification statement for 2024. Don?
so we do this every year with FDOT, every 4 years with Federal Highway. They have a whole process. They fill out a portion, we fill out a portion. I just sped down to page 84, essentially saying, based on the results of the 2024 joint certification, Lee MPO did not receive any recommendations or corrective actions. So essentially, it was a good certification review, but we need approval of it for the chair to sign along with FDOT.
Questions? Any public comment? Need a motion to approve?
Laura Carr, motion to approve.
Second.
Say your name for Corinne. Could
Thank
you
you.
could you identify?
It's okay with a voice vote then, right? Sorry. Okay, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Moving on, provide direction on the Pine Island Trail project. Don?
So we had a long discussion about this in after a presentation by FDOT back in November. As I look around, there's several members that weren't here in November, so Let me go through some of what was in that presentation and some of the issues that we're facing. So this project goes back many years. Obviously, there have been some issues out there, and had the pandemic in the middle of some of it too. But this was originally brought up probably about 10 years or so ago, where we were looking at trying to do a multi-use path from Burn Store Road out to Pine Island. So it's different in different segments, and that was one of the discussions that happened at the last meeting. Segment 1 and Segment 3 are, they're pretty much, they're feasible at this point. Segment 2 was all the discussion we had previously, and based on the amount of space that's there and what's being used for parking and things like that, it turns out to be not feasible, the alternatives they came up with. And FTOT had, and at the discussion we had in November, they said, well, go back and look at some alternatives. There are no other, based on the restrictions that are put on what's in that portion of the corridor, there are no other alternatives that FTOT can look at this point. So one of the things that we had looked at was, well, maybe 1 and 3 could be done. Obviously, one of the issues that comes up out of that is that it's a congested area as it is in that area. So do you really want to put more bicycle and pedestrian traffic in there without something that's, facilities that are in that area? One of the things that and before I had these conversations in the last week or so with FDOT, that's why I had put in there maybe 1 and 3 or just 1 and 3 or whatever. We're kind of looking at the 3, just getting from Burn Store out to Matlacha and then calling it a day at that point. Obviously, there's some other issues that I should bring up as well. Right now, we have funding. Let me bring up that table. Right now, we have funding for PD&E, and then we also have design funding that's in there, but we do not have any other funding for construction at the moment, so funding is always an issue with us. This is we're talking about, for 3, for instance, you're talking about construction at about 2.5 million, something like that, in that range as part of the project. Beyond that, the other thing is this would end up being a responsibility of Lee County because FDOT's made the point, I know we've had this discussion before, that they're not going to be doing any more PD&E studies on local roads. That follows, Old 41, which we had discussed before, and things like Burn Store Road. So it'll be the responsibility of Lee County to take that on as well. And beyond that, there are obviously some other issues out there. There's a construction job out there that I'm sure people have been getting letters and stuff like I have regarding it. It's just different than when this all started from it. But I open it up for whatever kind of comments. I think we probably have some public comments here today as well, but also any questions that the board might have as part of this process. We can get into more detail if that's the pleasure of the board, but this kind of gives a wrap-up of where we're at the moment.
We had some thoughts brought up about some removal parking opportunities at the Matlacha section to improve the off-road parking there. Has that been followed up to any degree?
That gets to the actual issue there, that if you want to expand and put sidewalks or something like that, you're taking away the parking.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to clarify, I think I was one of the, Chair Rand and I were working on this together. This is a feasibility study, and basically you've come back that 1 and 3 are feasible, but 2 is not, which is the point that I tried to make in my first meeting, that we couldn't fit more congestion in the worst section of the road. So I'm pleased to see the results that isn't feasible. But I wanted to make sure that, are we looking at making an approval to fund an alternate funding for 1 or 3 today, or just accepting the results of the study was my impression that we were.
It is up to the board from there. You can, whichever way, we're kind of looking for direction at this point based on the discussions that happened before, whether you want to go forward with 1, 3, both, one of them or none, or no build essentially. Now, the feasibility study, it's not like we went very far into, I know we had some discussion in the executive committee about, well, you already spent money. It's really why we did the feasibility study up front instead of jumping right into PD&E and spending a bunch of money on where you're not having a feasible project at the end.
Yeah, my perception of what occurred in November is I thought we eliminated two from the broad scope, and they were going to take a look to see if there were any other options beyond what we had already looked at for that section two. And that being remote parking being one of some remote parking lots somewhere, which wasn't part of the original discussion.
Well, and that's the thing, from the discussion that happened at the board, it was made clear that they don't want to look at, the comments that were made, they don't want to look at removing that parking that's on there now.
Laura, you had a question?
I did. Don, which one do you think feasibly we could complete with the money available?
Well, originally I was planning on coming in here and saying 3.
Okay.
Because then you would look at, all right, that gives an opportunity for economic development of whoever wants to ride from Cape Coral out to Matlacha. And then you see what it's like if it, if you ever want to go and look at doing one. But when that discussion came up about putting more, essentially pedestrian, more bike traffic out in that area, it maybe doesn't necessarily make it safer.
Any other board questions?
So David, it's your project, right? So are you inclined to make a motion to proceed with 3, or you want to wait until?
So the crux of my objection in the first meeting was section 2 being unfeasible. It just didn't feel right to me as a longtime resident of Matlacha and passing trucks and boats and equipment and things to have parallel parking and, 2 10-foot lanes when you have 10 and 12-foot wide equipment and boats passing each other. It just didn't seem feasible, and that's been tested out now. So I'm grateful that we're not going to make it worse in the middle. I'm not closed-minded to the proposal for the Cape Coral section. Is it 3? Yeah, segment 3.
3, yeah.
Doesn't seem unreasonable to me to improve the Cape Coral access to that. So if that's something we can afford and fund to deliver people there and improve the Triple D Marina and all that section, Michelli's and everything else in there to improve that entrance, welcome to Matlacha area is something I would certainly be open-minded to.
Bill?
Well, is there any energy around focusing on some multimodal, and get people out of cars and getting into bicycles and choosing an alternative that would allow more bicycle, egress?
Well, I think that's going to happen in the section 3. It is part of that.
But will it increase safety?
Just the comment was that you're putting more within this 2 part of it where it's already pretty congested.
But if they could take a bike from veterans out to Matlacha instead of a car, maybe that does.
Yep.
That's what I was kind of hoping for.
Maybe that accomplishes
Great
what
little community that I would think bikes would like, the opportunity to go there if we gave them the opportunity. It helps a little bit with the auto traffic if they choose to do so.
Yeah, somebody could park at Publix Mall and pick up bikes and go for a ride, maybe that does do some good for the cars out there, so.
I'd like to see the potential for safe bicycle traffic on segment 2.
Wait, we were talking about 3.
Two different things. Section 2 isn't going to get changed at all.
Segment.
It's not feasible to put anything else in where that is now.
Okay.
But sections 1 and 3 are feasible. But the Pine Island end of this, I think, there'll be less people trying to leave Pine Island Center to go for a bike ride to Matlacha than there will be Cape Coral people
For sure.
wanting to leave. So I think if you're going to consider one or the other, the Cape Coral side is going to generate more opportunity for bikers, I think.
Okay.
My humble opinion.
What is the length of segment 3, mileage-wise? I can't figure out how many miles that might be, roughly.
My guess is about 4 miles.
About 4 miles. I mean, the whole project looks good in length, but when you do 4-mile segments and number 2 sounds like it never can be done. It seems like a path to nowhere.
The distance is 3.5 miles.
Go ahead.
From that section. What he was asking. The distance is about 3.5 miles.
Thank you.
For 3.
3.5? Thank you. Anybody else on the board with comments? We do have 2 public comment speakers. First, we'll go with Terry Lewis.
So, Terry Lewis, I'm currently the chairperson for the Lee County MPO Bike Ped Coordinating Committee. From a coordinating committee perspective, we did review this project in November, and our recommendation from the committee was to proceed with sections 1 and 3, and then evaluate partially, maybe doing partially part of 2, and leaving the Matlacha portion as is. I would, as a personal perspective, I always like to look at data. If you haven't seen bike walk scores, if you look at most of your real estate apps, they have bike walk scores, and they have validated through hundreds of thousands of real estate and commercial transactions and data, suggesting that improving your bike walk score improves the property value and the commercial value, as well as the commercial revenues from the businesses. So if we look at Pine Island and Cape Coral, you can see these are average numbers compared to Sanibel. Sorry, I messed it up. Fort Myers and Fort Myers Beach. Now these are averages. But if you look at it, a walk score designates the proximity to key services, grocery stores, schools, parks, restaurants. It's considered a 1 mile radius. If you can look at the bike score, it's bike infrastructure. At topography, destinations, a good thing with Florida, we are flat, so we get a really good score for topography. But it's also proximity to the services. And they give a bike score on the proximity and the infrastructure within 3 miles, although there was a discussion about micromobility and especially e-bikes, that there is a discussion to increase that to 5 miles. If we look at the data across the United States, and there's probably close to 1 million data points on it, it says residential property increases 1 point improvement, point, not percent, 1 point improvement increases the property value by 1%. Commercial property, 10 points improvement improves the property values by 9%. And economic performance, the economics for commercial sales, if you can increase the points improvements up to, if you get to a good score, which is considered 70 for bike, is a 71% increase per square foot revenue. Now, going out to Matlacha, a lot of those businesses, they need that accessibility. So I guess my recommendation is look at this as an economic and business investment for the communities of Cape Coral and Pine Island, and proceed with sections 1 and 3 and portion of 2, and then leave the portion through Matlacha as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Spakowski?
Good morning. This is a really, really important safety project as well as an economic development project. Right now, to get to the county's wonderful path along the entire length of Pine Island, people from Cape Coral have to drive out there because the only way they can get there by a bike or walking is on this incredibly narrow shoulder that almost nobody uses except people who are actually desperate to get to work. So I'd very much encourage you to keep this alive for segments 1 and 3, not just 3. Those are both non-controversial. There's space for both, and one will make it easier for people from Lee County, Cape Coral to get to Matlacha, and the other easier for people from Pine Island to get to Matlacha. As to segment 2, it's actually, I think, a little more complicated than when the study was conducted. In segment 2 is the section through Matlacha, and the eastern portion is the portion that was devastated most by Hurricane Ian, and it's the section where Florida DOT has completely rebuilt the road incredibly strengthened it. And in doing that, they've also paved the entire right-of-way. So where 2 years ago there were businesses who used the parking in the right-of-way, those businesses are gone. I don't know if they're going to come back. There's all kinds of reasons, title problems why they might not. So actually the eastern half of Section 2 now is feasible. In fact, it's already paved. It's really more a matter of just striping in that segment. So I think the eastern half of Segment 2 is very important to keep with Segment 3. As to the last section, the most difficult section through Matlacha, in my professional planning career, I've done 2 plans for Pine Island and Matlacha and have failed to come up with a better solution, and I'm not surprised that Florida DOT also was unable to find a solution to that intractable problem. But I believe that in that small section of Segment 2, maybe the current condition is the best we're going to get, and it's crowded, the right-of-way is narrow, but I wouldn't describe it as adding congestion by adding these bicycles, because these people coming on bicycles, often they're driving out there today, so we're going to have actually a reduction of some trips replaced by a bicycle trip, which is way easier to handle in a crowded area like Matlacha. So I encourage you to keep this project on track as much as it possibly can, accept the fact that the western part of Segment 2 might not be feasible. That doesn't mean the pieces on both sides of it are not feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this topic? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for either further discussion or a motion.
The only point is, his point about the eastern section, that is pretty well cleared out right now, and it really has been repaved. So there's probably maybe half a mile there that could be added, that gives you more access. From both sides of the road there were really, all of those businesses are wiped out, just about.
Sure.
Respectfully, those businesses may not exist today, but as a fan of Burke's Bar my whole life, I would like to see them have a chance to come back if they can, and I wouldn't want to do anything that would restrict their ability to reuse the space that they have and see what opportunity that they might have. But respectfully, I thank you for offering me the chance to make a motion on this. This Pine Island and Matlacha is where I grew up, and my family's been for over 110 years, and it's an area that's important to me and everybody else. But I would like to make a motion to accept the results of the study and then move forward with Phase 3 only. I don't think the Phase 1 area is going to get that much traffic or benefit to people who want to ride down Little Pine Island Mangrove Bank. There's nothing to see in the middle of that stretch for somebody to want to go to on a bike. I think it makes, so my motion is to accept the results of the study, feasibility study, and focus on improving Phase 3.
Second.
I would second that based on his,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I think you have your direction, Don.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you. Moving on, follow-up information on the Lee and Collier MPO coordination activities and projects. Don?
So at the last meeting, we had a discussion about the consolidation of the 2 MPOs, and there was a lot of different things about, hey, should we send a letter, should we do this, do that, and the direction was put together what some of the projects we've done over the years. So I did a whole write-up about how long, essentially 20 years worth of coordination between the 2 of us and why some of that occurred as part of that process. At this point, we've had discussions with FDOT, also my counterparts down in Collier regarding doing a study, and what we've come forward with is we want to do Phase 1. We have a deliverable that we can provide to the legislature if it comes to a point of being added back into a bill, but also provide a little bit of information, the questions that we haven't been able to answer to you all, and then also, as part of that process, get to the part that I think is probably where everybody's coming back, that we won't be able to agree on a voting apportionment, but have that all put down on a document that we can provide to them, particularly since FDOT is paying for it at this point. If it goes away and the requirement comes back, unfortunately, I think that we, as the Lee County MPO, would have to pay more of what that study is. And at the end of phase one, essentially, I don't know if we do it jointly or whatever, the two boards essentially say, or even if it turns out that, based on the votes, the way things go, it's population of 75% of the area. And the way it works is, if you don't have one of the two counties approving it, if one of them goes against it, or the largest city, Cape Coral, then you don't get to an agreement as it is anyway. And it might be Bonita. That's the part I haven't figured out yet, because Bonita is actually the largest city of their urban area. But anyway, those votes would be at your own area if we ever even get that far. And I don't think we will, but at least we'll have a document to be able to provide in response to that.
Mr. Chair?
Sure, Laura.
Do you have an approximate date for the kickoff meeting?
So FDOT's working on, I don't know if you...
Mr. Chair, Wayne Gaither, for Department of Transportation. No, we do. What we're going to wait on is to get from Don and from both Ann not a motion or anything of that nature, but just approval generally from both boards that it is okay to move forward with what Don described as the study. And at that point, we have been in contact with Cutter, and we can then proceed with procuring their services to provide the study itself.
Okay. And a more important question, Don. What do you think are the pros and cons of this in a nutshell?
So unfortunately, I thought there were a few more pros than when we started talking about it, because one of the issues is that their urban area grew all the way up to Alico Road now. Mm-hmm. And there's agreements, for instance, Lee Tran has with a certain amount of funding that comes to that area based on that population where they transfer money. And I was hoping if you did combine, you'd solve that. But what I got back is you might still have two TMAs within your area. Those are some of the answers we're trying to get as a response to that. On the other side of that is there is some thought from, let's say, some people that were pushing this, that if we were combined, they would address some of the issues going across the county line and congestion in the southern portion of the county and the northern portion of their county. And that's why we're working together on the congestion management plan. But my fear is they think there's a whole lot more money behind that some of these things are being held back because we don't want to do something more so than what it costs. And I can point directly at something like Old 41, where their project costs, right-of-way costs, ballooned to $90 million just right-of-way on their portion of Old 41.
There being Collier?
Collier, yes. And it takes out a lot of right-of-way, actually existing industrial business and stuff. It's other issues out there that impact why something's being done or not. So, anyway.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
If I could, thank you. Yeah, this is obviously started over a year ago. When the state representative, obviously he's focused on his area and is selfish in a way because this obviously is going to affect the whole Southwest Florida area. But, I was in meetings with him with different people in the South Lee County, and his comments were, I'm just trying to rattle some cages. I want to rattle the cages for Lee and Collier MPO. But we know, people, if you've been here for a while, you look back historically, this type of function doesn't work well. We've seen that the RPC, when you're sitting here as a group making decisions for the city of Naples, who's not sitting around the table that we don't represent, it's really frustrating to do that. That's why the RPCs don't really work, and that's why they've gone away. But I think once the study of things done, it will come out to show that why it would be feasible. Lee County's got 6 cities, Collier's got 1 city, and I think we're doing a good job now as the MPO. And I think the thought of you're going to get more money just for, and I know, but it'd be needed representative here, but I think that's what he said. I think he said the Venetians want more money, more of the pie. We want some of the Collier's money. So I don't think that's really going to be feasible to do that. I think Collier and the city of Naples would be feasible to do that. So I think the study is going to reveal a lot of this. This is more or less just a political thing that somebody wants to do. So we'll talk about it in the future, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board questions, comments? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on. Safe Streets for All Study Update Presentation.
So Matt from Stantec is here to give a presentation. We will be approving the document at the next meeting, but we didn't want to just drop it on you next month without some background to it. So go Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Don. My name's Matthew Marr. I'm with Stantec Consulting Services. I'm a principal, and I'd like to present a project we've had the pleasure of working with Lee MPO on. It was funded through the Federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. And there's different sorts of grants through this program. This is the first grant phase, meaning developing a safety action plan. So this is the first step to create meaningful safety, traffic safety change within the county. Developing a plan that sets up the subregional municipalities and Lee County DOT to apply for funding to select projects, kind of a la carte, if you will, that come out of this study. So we're right at the tail end of this program. As you can see, we're right here, right before we submit our draft report at the end of the month for MPO review. A lot of work went into this project. We had a series of 3 stakeholder team meetings. There will be a 4th one on Tuesday from 2 to 4, so keep that in mind, and I'll reiterate that at the end. Then we had public outreach and activities, conducting a high-injury network crash analysis, which we'll go through in a bit, and identifying various countermeasures, crash countermeasures, meaning measures to counteract safety issues throughout the county. And not only did we want to develop engineering-based solutions, but also policies, recommendations, such as improving the visibility of walking and biking modes like bike buses, improved wayfinding for bicycles and pedestrians, and then the later tasks, the safety action plan document, and developing a performance measure plan that the MPO can use going forward beyond the course of this study to track fatal and serious injury crashes, just as a measure of how are we doing now that we've constructed these improvements, now that we've enacted these programs. What safety wins are we achieving? So this was the need behind this study. The county was averaging over 100 deaths per year on county and municipal and other roadways within the county. Over 600 serious injury crashes per year. We'll go into what that means on the next slide. But you can start to see the scarification on the map, kind of corridors emerging that our study wanted to address and target. If you were to use Florida Department of Transportation or FDOT crash cost to say what these crashes cost us societally each year, there's over $2 billion worth of damage due to loss of life, serious injury crashes, and such. So we're familiar with fatal crashes. Serious injury we also want to highlight because these are the types of crashes where you were just inches or millimeters away from loss of life. Could be puncture, blood, broken extremities, and it's very jarring, but we want to bring visibility to this issue. This is a very pressing need. Education is just one of the steps recommended by the Federal Highway Administration, and these are just a summary of how it's kind of morbid, but we want to attempt to kind of put a dollar amount to this, also with the idea that no fatal or serious injury crash is acceptable. And that is what the county is looking to achieve with this study. So we have our high injury network here. This is based off of that map I had shown earlier, just taking into account not only fatal and serious injury crashes across the county, but also what are the geometric conditions of the roadways? Are there key markers of things such as road speed or block length or presence of a bike path or other means that would put these roads at risk for fatal and serious injury crashes? Because fatal and serious injury crashes can be random events, meaning you might have a few one year and none the next. So we wanted to even out that data, not only be informed by the crash data that's going on, but also the geometric data that we collected. And not only did we pinpoint high injury network corridors across the county, but intersections as well, based on where the fatal and serious injury crashes were occurring at intersections. So here's a bar chart of road KSI, fatal serious injury. You'll hear me say KSI, fatal serious injury is the same thing. KSI crashes by roadway jurisdiction. So we have county, local, state, and interstate. And so you can see most of the KSI crashes are occurring on county and local jurisdiction roadways. And you can also see this broken up in the blue and green bar charts showing a similar profile for pedestrian and bicycle crashes, respectively. So we developed an online crash data dashboard to track, to provide some public accountability, some visibility to the analysis going into this study. So right now, if you go onto the MPO website, you can look up the crash data for the past 10 years. You can actually zoom in if you're interested in a particular intersection, see the crash history at that location. And we have bar charts and filters if you only want to look at pedestrian crashes or bicycle crashes. And this online crash tool will be the tool that the MPO uses going forward to see how are we doing. They're going to update it annually to refresh this data, to track, well, since we've enacted policies, since we've constructed improvements on roads X, Y, and Z, what's happened since then, to kind of give a before versus after analysis. Another important part of our crash data collection effort was to install cameras to track near-miss incidents at high injury network intersection locations. And as you'll see on the next video, just to warn some people, there's a crash on this next slide. Not only did we detect near-miss incidents with this technology, but we also did record crashes. So this is in Cape Coral at Cape Coral Parkway and Coronado, between a left turn and oncoming vehicle. Also at that same intersection, we see a cyclist going against right-of-way, and not only a near-miss involving a left turn crash, but also a right turn crash. So there's things that we can take away from this technology, such as changes in signal phasing, providing a leading interval, and removing a right turn or enacting right turn on red restrictions. And of course, this also lends to the credence of education, making sure our populace is educated to be street smart. There are campaigns that the MPO and more local governments can use at their disposal to raise awareness of this public health safety crisis. So our approaches to the study are different because this is a federally funded program. And I wanted to carry everyone through this paradigm shift. I touched on it a little bit earlier. What we used to do in traffic safety is a site-specific approach, meaning we would record crashes at a specific location and then in turn propose safety improvements at that same location. And it would be a very reactive approach, meaning if we recorded a certain number of crashes at that location In reaction to that, we would implement leading pedestrian interval, we would change signal phasing, we would do a road diet, and just one such example is using a high injury network based on crash location. So the new paradigm is to be proactive, meaning we would look to proactively install countermeasures at all sites system-wide that meet a certain criteria. And this goes into the geometric data collection that we did. What are the markers of a road that tend to predispose them to KSI crashes? Is it the block length? Is it the posted speed? Are there certain roadways to target based on what's already baked into the cake? And we took that approach with this project. We look to take stock of both the crash and geometric data. And also systemic, so systemic combines systematic and site-specific approaches. So we proactively install countermeasures at locations with the highest risk of severe crashes. So we marry that geometric data with that crash history data. And we use those crash characteristics that are occurring on roadways that are already experiencing fatal and serious injury crashes, and we see where else throughout the county network are there other roadways that are matching those roadway characteristics that are seeing fatal serious injury crashes, meaning these roadways might not currently be experiencing fatal serious injury crashes, but they have the characteristics where they could. So our comprehensive approach that we undertook with this study is to do both reactive and proactive approaches, and this is just based on what is the current federal practice. And of course, this is a federally funded program, so we took that approach with this project. So next, I want to carry us through project identification. So we have our high injury network locations. Those were displayed on the maps, both for the segments and the intersections. We flagged those locations that were experiencing higher speeds. We took socioeconomic data into account for county recommendations. We took high injury network roadway characteristics for recommendations. That's that proactive approach. And in reviewing all this data, we came up with the following emphasis areas. What are the common types of crashes that are resulting in fatal and serious injuries? And so high speed, obviously, if you have a vehicle traveling at a higher rate of speed, there's more kinetic energy that will be imparted on the other vehicle being collided with. Higher kinetic energy means greater chance of loss of life or serious injury. Pedestrian and bicyclists, so there's also a big vulnerable road user focus for this study. If you're not in a car, you're more exposed to the chance of a fatal or a serious injury crash. Intersection crashes, specifically left turn and right angle collisions, you might know them as T-bone collisions, so someone's making a left turn and there's an oncoming through vehicle that tends to travel at a high rate of speed. And roadway departure, trees and utility poles are very unforgiving, and when you direct that amount of kinetic energy in a vehicle towards a fixed object, bad things can happen. So these are our emphasis areas. This is what we wanted to help Lee County DOT and municipalities target for funding, locations for funding for improvements, for safety improvements. And so our improvements aren't only focused on roads. This is a multidisciplinary effort. This is in keeping with the Federal Highway Administration's paradigm of the safe system approach. So in the past, there's been a huge focus on safer roads. How can we engineer roads to protect drivers better? But it really takes all 5 approaches to see meaningful change, meaningful reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes. We want to codify into law things that will make vehicles themselves safer, education campaigns that will make road users safer, especially pedestrians and cyclists. We want to encourage safer speeds through traffic calming measures. We want to encourage better post-crash care for our EMTs. Maybe it's a changing of their fleet to make sure they have vehicles where they can more rapidly respond to fatal serious injury crashes. And so those are some of the policies that we'll touch on in a bit, going back to the engineered countermeasures that we're using to address these 4 areas that we identified: speed management, ped bike, intersection roadway departure. We have various improvements. I don't have time to go through all of them, but you can see all of them listed here. And a lot of these are proven safety countermeasures, so you'll actually see them on the Federal Highway Administration's website saying there's been a documented history of where you install this at a particular location, you get a X% reduction in crashes at that same location. So it's proven. These are things that are shown to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes when properly installed. So that's the engineering side of things. To touch on all other 4 points on that safe system approach wheel, we have our policy recommendations. So the MPO is going to be...
While you're on this?
Sure thing.
Did you do a study like how, though, it also could add to congestion?
Yes, so there's going to be a weighing of pros and cons. So where you do slow down speeds, there is in turn, reduction in capacity. Where you add no turn on red restrictions at a signalized intersection, there's going to be a reduction in capacity, changes in left turn phasing, etc. But what the study stresses here, and this is the argument that the municipalities are going to carry back to their constituents, is the value of time that may be currently saved pales in comparison to those FDOT crash costs we presented earlier on in the presentation. You can run the numbers, you can do a benefit cost analysis, but straight by the data, even if there's, we've enacted things like leading pedestrian intervals at intersections where you stop all vehicular traffic to let pedestrians start to walk out into the street, establish their presence. If you're using that and reducing fatal serious injury crashes by 50%, you assign those those Florida Department of Transportation crash costs, your value of time is going to be far under whatever societal benefit.
Life,
exactly.
Which could be your loved one. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Really good question. Yes.
Thank you for that information. We've done this before in different aspects, but you haven't talked even about education. We've done a lot of changes here in Lee County the last 15 years that I've been involved, and as far as improvements of pedestrian bicycle improvements, but you haven't mentioned education. All these things you're talking about the roads, the right turn red, that's at the time that's actually comes back to driver error. We have to install crosswalk, pedestrian crosswalk markings that people still walk 50 feet away from it across mid-intersection. They're crossing that. So I think one of our biggest obstacles here is because we have a lot of tourists come here. We don't have a large urban area like in New York City, or I think a lot of this is kind of like an urban London kind of pitfall as far as we want to reduce traffic. We want to ride bicycles, which is not going to happen. It's also Florida, so people are going to still drive a lot of cars. So we're not going to have that big urban walking downtown area. We don't have that here in Lee County. So the big thing for us is education. We've done this in 2014. MDOT's done a lot, done some education thing, but pedestrian driver, when you have people driving the wrong way on roundabouts, people driving the wrong, and speed may not be the high cause contributor to the accident itself. The traffic homicide investigator for 25 years, I can tell you that all the accidents I work with, there's a death involved, speed, but usually because of driver error, not because of speed. Speed contributes to the accident, but the actual violation right away, intersection, exchange, that because of people's error. So we have a lot. States passed a law last year. They're going to stop more people in the left lane. I know the local law enforcement is still writing this main tickets for going people too slow and too fast. Yeah. Speed is not really contributing. Like Laura said, congestion right now is our biggest issue. We want people to go point A to point B faster, safely. But again, that comes back on the driver education, driver awareness, and capability of driving a vehicle. They got to ride it
And paying attention, no texting.
The biggest thing now, we often see it, any car you sit next to a traffic light, people are on their phones, playing games, doing emails, watching a video, whatever it may be. So you have driver distractions while you have people. But again, we also have people that are capable of driving around roundabouts the wrong way, off the interstate the wrong way. So those measures, we've taken a lot of measures on those, have stuff done here lately in the last few years, trying to deter that, people going the wrong way of the interstates. Now we're going to deal with roundabouts. But the big thing is education. It starts back at the school level. We did some programs back in 2013 and 14, trying to get that at the school level back to driver's ed, teaching people this is how you cross. Like we saw the bicycles a minute ago crossing without waiting for signal. That was an accident. The road was not at fault. Lights weren't at fault. It was the driver, pedestrian, bicycles there at fault. So that would be professional education.
Yeah. Something I'm a big fan of for transient populations, and we've seen this implemented in other barrier island locales, and obviously you can do it in downtown Fort Myers as well, is to post street smart campaign signs where you can actually zip tie to light posts and stuff and get people to think about safety as they're walking through the downtown area. There's a huge focus on vulnerable road users, the people that are walking and biking. And of course, similar signing would also target drivers. But that's one sort of education campaign that I know has been done elsewhere that could apply to Lee County as well. Do I have time to run through all that? Yeah, so, there's, in getting, just covering some of the policies here, so the MPO is going to produce an annual Vision Zero report to measure the progress of these changes, both educationally, actually I shouldn't say both because there's many different angles, educationally, enforcement-wise, engineering, and other components. There's going to be an annual Vision Zero workshop. We're also going to work with local agencies to adopt their own Vision Zero resolutions. So the MPO can only do so much. We would be looking to equip the municipalities both from a policy perspective and an engineering perspective, which I'll touch on in a bit. Other policy recommendations, and just going through high level, performing road safety audits. I'm a huge fan of those, just walking along a corridor that's experienced fatal serious injury crashes, to actually be out in the field and see what's going on. And it's amazing how illuminating it can be, especially to bring in an outsider perspective. Sometimes, if there's an issue I'm trying to solve, and I'm just way too familiar with, I need an outside opinion to help me solve the issue, and that's what the road safety audit seeks to do with an interdisciplinary team. We also have land development guidelines to consider ped bike impacts of developments that are being constructed. That's a very policy-based effort that is very proven to reduce fatal serious injury crashes along with the road safety audits. Just blazing through these. Design guidelines to reflect Federal Highway Bicycle Selection Guide. So kind of adapting what the feds are doing, and based on posted speed, based on block length, based on available right-of-way width, what type of bicycle infrastructure can we implement on each corridor. It's a very scalable tool, and it's meant to be a tool. It's not meant to be a black box, but something to help Lee County DOT and other jurisdictions help to select the preferred bicycle safety treatment for each road. Online GIS applications, creating guidelines focused on speed management, not only enforcement, but traffic calming treatments. There's only so much you can do with enforcement dollars and with posted speed signs. It's really the road, the design of the road that's going to enforce safer travel at the end of the day. And there's coordination work with FDOT, of course, on their recent safety action plan that was done for Lee County. We also are adopting connection standards for access management. So you see this figure down here. The more driveway points that we can consolidate or revoke entirely, the less conflict points we have for drivers. These are these red dots here, the less conflict points and potential crashes resulting from that. So think of a strip mall. You have this wide curb apron, people coming in and out, and we'd just be looking to narrow those aprons to reduce the potential conflicts and weaving and left turns that occur at driveway locations. There's many, many more, and there's certainly more in the education category, but that will be produced at the end of the month. So to quickly go over success stories, so where has this worked elsewhere? Because we don't want to do a safety action plan if it's not shown to work. So the city of Lakeland has seen a 46% reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes from 2016 to 2020. There's some rebound there, as you can see in that chart. Despite a growing population, which is impressive. City of Tampa, they are seeing consistent market downturns in fatal serious injury crashes, 17% reduction from 2020 to 2023. And so what are they doing? Well, the city of Lakeland's installing leading pedestrian intervals. That's that improvement I had mentioned earlier, where pedestrians able to walk out into the intersection with all vehicles stopped. It's able to provide the pedestrians a sight line with all traffic, so there's less likely a left hook or right hook collision involving pedestrians. We also have Lakeland doing an intersection collision avoidance safety program. So the signal is actually able to detect when a vehicle is driving into an intersection about to turn red. We call that, traffic engineers call that a dilemma zone, meaning you don't have enough time to stop, you don't have enough time to go through to escape the red. So the signal timing will actually adjust to show red for all vehicles for a longer portion of time to allow those vehicles that are running red lights to clear the intersection.
But you're not going to tell people that, right?
No, because then, we don't want anything to be abused, only as a measure to improve safety. And then the city of Tampa is very progressive when it comes to quick build projects. You see the green paint going up everywhere on their roadways for the addition of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, curb extensions, bike lanes, cycle tracks, all improves visibility of our vulnerable road users, also cuts down on speeds, and they're partnering with the University of South Florida to track how this program's reducing speeds. Funding opportunities, and I'm sorry for going long, but there is a lot at our disposal, both federal and state. I'm sure you may have heard in the news different changes for federal funding program requirements. The good news is the money's still on the table. We're still able to do it. There's just changes in phraseology and wording that need to be done to continue to apply for those funds. So that's great news. And then there's more local strategies such as FDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program, safe routes to school, transportation alternatives, very walking, biking focused programs. Reconnecting Communities grants, this is more so in jeopardy. This is probably going to be retooled. And FDOT subgrants, public-private partnerships. So there's a lot in flux, but our safety action plan document will look to equip you, the municipalities, as the users to go after the funds, to see where the websites to check. The final report is going to provide your roadmap to apply for design and construction funds. And it's kind of an a la carte, pick a project, pick a policy, and then pick the most appropriate funding source. And something we'd like to stress, because time. Multi-jurisdictional applications are always the most successful. Think of your neighboring municipality and think of, okay, maybe this is a particular project where we're butting up with Lee County DOT jurisdiction and see if there's a application where both of you can come in together to apply for safety funds to fund programs, policies, and construction improvements. So let's get building. Any questions?
Board, any questions, comments? Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
No, I'm relatively new at this, but safety-wise, we can all agree we want to be safer. If we're trying to drive more bicyclists out there rather than cars, my concern as a driver a lot of times is there are bad behaviors of bicyclists out there, and they don't obey the same traffic signals, stoplights, run crosswalks like you see there. They think the rules don't apply to them, and you're not looking where they're coming from because they're not behaving as a car would, right? Yeah. And so there's some challenges to driving more of those people to mingle and weave in between traffic to not get hit when you're pulling out to looking where you're supposed to be looking to go to travel. So I don't know what kind of educational, I don't know if there's bike police out there that can pull over bikers for running stop signs, but as an aside, I think there's some behavioral issues where e-bikes and golf carts and everybody buzzing around and intermingling with these things are causing more of a hazard than we need. And then my second question to this, if you would indulge me, please, is one other concern I have as a driver is when we beautify medians, a lot of times I see what we do after the fact plantings. I don't know how we look at those view corridors when, like Summerlin Road, when you come up to Home Depot and Lowe's, you used to be able to see that the traffic was stopped at a red light in front of you before you came in the corner, and now all the trees are blocking your line of sight, and you don't know it until you're on top of them. But you can't look very far ahead by the way the trees and landscapings are planted. So McGregor Boulevard has those things, and we're actually making more obstacles to vision to not be able to plan ahead as well with some of the way these landscaping is being designed. So I hope there's some efforts we can do in those means.
Yeah. To address both points, firstly, yeah, those two key words that you had mentioned, engineering and enforcement, that is the two-pronged approach to address pedestrian and bicycle non-compliant behavior. What we've seen is a combination of citations and then as well engineered strategies to improve the visibility of the pedestrians that are walking out on red. Adding no turn on red restrictions helps with that. There's certain strategies to improve pedestrian visibility, such as curb extensions. What you say is true. There has to be a targeted enforcement effort there as well.
But making it harder on cars to drive and no turn on red is restricting the people that are cooperating with the current rules. We need to have these other actors, as they are folded in, have the proper behaviors as well, rather than just restricting cars. Yeah, in my opinion.
A no turn on red restriction it's a de minimis reduction in delay compared to the safety improvements that can be proposed. Also, to touch on the second one, yes, trees in the median should be removed. It blocks line of sights, as you had mentioned, and adds another fixed object in the median. So that's one way to.
Commissioner Pendergrass.
Yeah, thank you for the information. I just noticed Rob, our director of DOT, walked in right doing our question here. And Rob, can you hear me? You're back there behind the pole, I believe. Yeah, I don't know if you heard the rest. You don't have to come up, sir. I'm just letting you know. I will be bringing this up to the board since there's only two of us here today in the future, and I'll be discussing with our DOT engineer. I think some of these are great ideas, but again, a lot of this also goes against currently what we're doing in Lee County as far as roads, and I'm going to get with staff, and I'll probably bring it up for action for the board to respond, because a lot of this, as far as taking the right on red away, we have a lot of intersections, a lot of improvements. We got billions of dollar road improvements projects in the ground, and a lot of this stuff's already been implemented, so making changes would be really drastic. So we're trying to get cars faster from point A to point B with safety measures already in place based upon the measures we took in 2011 and 2014. I will bring it up as the board, probably a commissioner on the next meeting. So the rest of the board can hear about this. We can give the board's response to this. Rob, you okay with that? Okay, thank you. That's all Rob's reactions is through some of the comments, so I just want to make sure we talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you're doing the advanced pedestrian, you got to go all red, I would guess.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of an extended all red. It certainly helps reduce the crashes with the bad behavior that's talked about. If they're gonna run the red, they're gonna run the red. But if you don't let the other traffic begin, you help avoid that crash. Well, then you add the pedestrian and the bicycle traffic. One of the things I've always been, curious about is the go or don't go is on the other side of the intersection. And when we have shared use paths, if you will, and that bicycle is already in motion, rolling, why wouldn't we want something that says don't cross where they enter the intersection rather than at the end of the intersection where they could potentially already be in harm's way? And so just a simple change of, if there's already going to be an indicator that's facing that way, why can't there be an indicator on the other side that deals with approaching intersections where those pedestrians that are in a hurry on their phone or a bicyclist already in motion has a warning as they get to the intersection rather than it being on the other side of the intersection. So I would just speak in favor of a thought of something maybe new where you'd be warning them before they get into the intersection rather than at the other side. And the other is I'm a strong proponent of going to extended all reds. If you went to a 5-second all red at all major intersections, you'd have to hit 12 of them before it would ruin 1 minute of traffic. But how many lives could it save by having somebody that does run an intersection not connect up with another car that immediately got that green from the other direction?
As a traffic engineer, I love this vehicle clearance discussion that you're allowing me to geek out. And there's two types of clearances we're talking about here. There's the clearance for the driver, making sure the driver has enough time to clear the intersection, and the bicycle has enough time to clear the intersection. Just in the realm of driving, I know there's the vehicle to infrastructure connected corridor that FDOT's currently working on with US 41. Where vehicles could potentially be warned of an upcoming change to a red light. And of course, the intersection avoidance technology example that I cited is a good way to provide those 5 seconds, but maybe not every cycle length, because the signal can detect and determine when a vehicle is running that red light, so it can seek to balance out capacity and safety. And then secondly, bicycles going through the intersection. Where there's heavy bicycle traffic, by all means, you can implement something like a bicycle signal at an intersection. I'm sure you might have seen them in New York or other similar urbanized areas, or even, barrier island signals. I think I can think of a few where you actually have a bicycle silhouette on the vehicle signal, and they do get a green, yellow, red, and that yellow comes up sooner to make sure that they have enough time to drive through the intersection and clear it. So that's all good strategies, and certainly what we look to promote with the safety action plan.
Mayor Miller?
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Malika's comment. At Sanibel, as we've seen more and more e-bikes on our shared use path, it's become kind of a problem. So in response to that, we've introduced speed limits in various sections of the paths, generally around 15 miles an hour, and also dealing with other behavioral issues like ignoring stop signs and so forth. But in order to better educate and enforce, we are hiring 3 rangers that will kind of patrol the paths, try to encourage compliance. At the moment, they are not sworn officers. So the emphasis is more on education than enforcement. We'll see how that works, but this is our attempt to deal with the problems we're facing on cyclist behavior.
To that end, we did a micro-mobility, so e-bike, e-scooter, crash analysis as part of the study, and Ron had the great idea of encouraging that. We saw similar crash profiles to if you were walking. So even if you're on an e-scooter, e-bike, you have the same exposure to fatal and serious injury crashes. I think the big risk posed by those modes is the speed, because we want to make sure that there's the speed limiter on it, that it's not, there's no, aftermarket modifications to this equipment, and that could be a potential issue for your rangers to address, if they see one that's going at a particularly high rate of speed, even far beyond oh, it's going over the speed limit. Whoa, this is going over way over the speed limit. This is the time to say, what type of equipment do you have here? Have you thought about how you're much more vulnerable to being killed or seriously injured because you're going at such a high rate of speed? Because trees don't give, bulls don't give.
Or kill someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And that does happen.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that our sheriffs pointed out is there's no place on the ticket to ticket a cyclist versus cyclist on a. So they're like, all right, you guys work it out, and they, because there's nowhere to do it. There's no box, so we need to deal with getting a box.
A lot of that lies with the state. There's other things that lie with the state, which we will encourage with the safety action plan. Vehicle registration is a very important thing, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of interesting vehicles on roads, and so we want to make sure that there is more of a top-down approach in that regard to making sure all of our modes of travel, especially vehicles, are reasonably protecting the driver, reasonably protecting other people that are driving and walking and biking. And on e-scooters, it really takes all strategies, everything you've seen on the safe system approach, safe roads, safe users, safe speeds, post-crash care. It takes all those components to see a marked change in fatal and serious injury crashes.
Anything else from the board? Any public comment on this presentation? Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to other business. Any public comments on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Lee-Tran/TD report.
Good morning, Kelly Fernandez from Lee-Tran. I have a brief update on Lee-Tran services and projects for you. Our fixed route ridership for January and February averaged 160,000 monthly riders, which is about 1%, within 1% of what last year's ridership was. Our paratransit trips continue to average 600 passengers daily, which includes transportation disadvantaged trips. Our mobility on demand services transported an average of 5,000 passengers monthly in both January and February, with approximately 3,500 in Bonita Springs and 1,500 in Lehigh Acres. In addition, our 515 route, the Lehigh Acres Circulator, served an additional 2,200 passengers. Our 2025 Transit Development Plan continues on schedule for delivery to FDOT in September of 2025, and we're currently reviewing proposed improvements to the system and anticipate stakeholder interviews will be conducted in the coming months. The ADA Bus Stop Improvement Project continues, which includes the design, engineering, and construction of 136 bus stops. The design for the first 50 stops is currently at 60% plans, which are under review by staff. The solicitation for the construction is expected to be on the street in June, and construction of those 50 stops is expected to begin by fall of '25. The Lehigh Acres Park and Ride facility received the temporary certificate of occupancy and is scheduled to open on April 24th to coincide with our off-season service change. The design for our electric bus project is currently underway for the charging infrastructure, and our vendor, ChargePoint, has completed the fleet and energy route modeling and will be on site in April for a site evaluation. The new bus stop and pull-offs associated with FDOT's roadway improvement project along State Road 865 are expected to be completed this summer, and we're soliciting for 2 new shelters to be installed at those locations. And our driver staffing levels continue to improve with nearly all positions filled at this time. And that's what I have for you this morning, unless you have any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to FDOT report.
Mr. Chair, as Marcellus moves forward to give an update, just a few things I wanted to bring up. We are in legislative session. Within our area, we have seen a fewer number of earmarks that have gone through as far as a count that they go through, but we are still seeing that some of these requests that are coming through are significant in nature as far as funding goes. Just a quick reminder, as earmarks go through, if they are paid for out of the transportation fund, you're basically reprioritizing the list of projects that occur within your area because the transportation fund is limited to what we have on an annual basis. Even if those projects do get vetoed, we still are finding that the budget that gives us the authority to spend those funds get tied up, which in essence means the funding that we have is still restricted because of the actions from earmarks that take place. The other thing that we're sharing with our state legislature is, amongst other policy positions that we're taking, is we are seeing a high cost in construction or the work that we do for projects still. So we're still seeing the resources extremely expensive. We're budgeting for those, but we're not seeing is an increase in revenue that we are able to use toward projects. That's remained relatively stagnant. So I'm sure we're doing the same. You guys are doing the same thing that we are. You're seeing tightening the belt, fewer projects, and rescoping of your projects to make sure that you're getting what you need out of an individual project. Just identifying some of the things the Florida Department of Transportation is having discussions with during this legislative session.
Thanks, Wayne.
In response to the revenue, lack thereof, is there any more pressure being put on EV, registration tax or something to make up for the gas tax reduction in income?
Actually, Don, I think Don's got something he could. There's 2 bills proposed. They're a little bit different. One is 6 cents per kilowatt at charging stations, and another one was I'm trying to remember the charge. It was a certain amount up to like 6.25 million per month. I think it worked out to be 75 million a year that would be taken from what is like its electric fees and pushed over to the trust fund.
Okay, thank you.
Don, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but my understanding is the analysis that was done towards that basically just identified what they anticipate electric vehicles to be in circulation, and then an understanding of what we'd normally get as far as registration fees or costs that we would get from gas tax. They then get put back.
For the $75 million one, yes. The 6 cents per capita. I mean, obviously, not everybody charges at a charging station, so that wouldn't work out the same way. But yes, for that one, based on what's out there right now, and then it expired in like 2030, something like that. I guess with the presumption that you would relook at it at that point.
Yeah, and is anyone taking up the charge for one or the other or both? I certainly would be more in favor of the one that is not based on charging stations, because the majority of that is being done at home.
Yeah, same here. It depends. There's other things in those bills, and some people like things in certain bills and don't like them as much, so that depends. See, moving forward, what happens.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to put out a public meeting that we'll have on April 2nd. That'll be a Wednesday. It could be virtual or in person. That's for the State Road 78 project from east of Del Prado Boulevard to Hibiscus Drive. It's from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And you can join virtually or get information on it from the Southwest Florida Roads website.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other board questions, comments on this? Thank you. Any announcements?
What she said.
Information and distribution items? Hearing none, I'll move to adjourn at 10:20. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.